Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Welcome newcomers to the Facebook group, the podcasts and our Teachific resources. We love hearing the diverse reasons why teachers across the world are joining. So much deep and thoughtful and creative literacy work going on in schools. Some recent comments. Firstly, we always get a range of comments from pre-service teachers to leaders. So from a leader to share great ideas, from some teachers, community and resources, professional development. I love learning new ways of teaching and trying it on my students every day. From another teacher, looking to the group and the podcast for support. And from a pre-service teacher, ideas and inspiration for teaching literacy meaningfully and effectively for my future students. So if you're not a member of the Teachers Toolkit Facebook group, we'd love you to join and introduce yourself to the group. And now welcome to this podcast called Visual Artistry Unveiled, Teaching with Graphic Novels, with Greg Holfeld and with Phil. So welcome, Phil. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Sharon.
Hi, Sharon. Hi, Phil.
Greg, what have you been up to lately?
In terms of comic books, not a whole lot. Well, I guess when you say lately, last time I was here in the Q Learning Media Tower was pre-COVID. So COVID affected just about everyone's sort of work situation. When I was told I would have to work remotely in isolation, I thought, easy, I've been doing that for about 35 years. But most of the work I found myself doing was in film and television. So perhaps of interest, but not necessarily relevant to your listenership, was the storyboard work I've been doing. However, I am currently just finishing up the last Captain Congo adventure I've done with Ruth Starkey, who passed away just under a year ago. And we just before she passed away, we did have the opportunity to finish one last script, which is currently being published in serial format in the school magazine.
Oh, so this is the fourth.
This is, well, actually, it's about the seventh. We did four.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, we did four graphic novels with Working Title Press, which are now under the HarperCollins imprint.
Yes.
And then subsequent to that, we ended up doing comic serials in the school magazines, which are published by the New South Wales Department of Education.
Yes.
Great magazines, great resource for teachers. I'm sure a lot of your listenership is aware of them. They've got stories, puzzles, and comics, which is great for me and Ruth. So yeah, we started submitting Captain Congo stories to them, and they were quite happily, and they were enthusiastically received. So we did four. We're finishing up the fourth one right now.
Oh, brilliant! Right, so that, yes, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are in touch with those and would be using those in their classrooms. Now, the first four, Captain Congo. Are they still, they were with Working Title Press. Who are they?
Now you'd find them available through HarperCollins. I think some of them might be falling out of print or hard to find.
Right.
But just contact me at gregholfeld.com. And depending where you are, if you're willing to weather the ridiculous postage costs, I might be able to help you out with a copy.
Beautiful. Excellent. So.
And COVID was affected you in certain ways, Greg, or?
Well, and sort of in a way it affected everybody in that we all spent a lot more time at home. Again, that didn't necessarily cramp my style too much. What was interesting in terms of children's books and children's literature is that COVID gave everyone the opportunity to sit back and decide now's the time to get to that kid's book script that's been sitting in my bottom drawer at the back of the files, or and I got more than a few sort of queries about can you help me illustrate my my children's book manuscript,
yes.
and like most of those I had to bat away. Though there was one that was really, I really did enjoy doing, Icky Sticky Summer Fly which I have a copy here in my bag, which I meant to bring out and show you before we started. But it was one of those where, every illustrator knows this story where, I think everyone has at least one kid's book in them or reckons they do.
Yes.
And it will find our way to us. There's this common misconception out there that you can't present a kid's book to, or propose a kid's book to a publisher unless it's illustrated beforehand. And no, they don't fall out of the sky ready-made. Publishers and editors just want to see manuscripts. And most of the time that's, what I explain to people, and they go off and they, hopefully we'll have some success then with their edited manuscript, approaching a publisher. In this case, the Garth Cavell wanted to publish it himself. He'd had some experience publishing other things, sort of non-kids book related. And I really liked the manuscript. It was really fun and simple and not too long. It was, it did hit the sweet spots. So yes, if anyone wants to dig this book up, Icky Sticky Summer Fly, Papa Hip is the name of the publisher. It's and that's the last kids book I've done.
Right. Okay.
Well, watch out for that one. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So our topic today, visual artistry and Unveiled. We notice working with teachers that they sometimes find it tricky to use graphic novels in their teaching, Sharon. Yep.
Yes. I think a lot of people, a lot of teachers, I think we bring graphic novels into the classroom knowing that for many students, and I think you talked a lot about this last time, Greg, the idea of it being a novel was really that shift, wasn't it? Comics.
We could revisit the terminology between graphic novels and comics and just quietly, they're the same thing.
Well, let's fix that one.
Yeah. Look, the term graphic novel was coined by Will Eisner, and it was who's a very, very famous cartoonist. In fact, the industry awards are called the Eisners. They're only open to Americans, sadly. Otherwise, I would have, submitted quite some time ago. Not that I just necessarily do Eisner quality work, but it'd be nice to be in the running. He coined the term graphic novel to differentiate sort of some long form, more mature work that he was doing, to differentiate that from the superheroes and funny animals that were on the spinner rack at the corner store. Yeah. Now that was part of the media landscape of the 1960s and 70s when he came up with the term graphic novel and published A Contract with God, which is kind of regarded as the first graphic novel. And so it was a term that publishers and ultimately librarians took hold of to differentiate between what was sort of short form, kind of in periodical form, and maybe definitely children's orientated, to something that was supposedly more substantial, both in terms of subject matter and in length.
Right.
But so graphic novels are kind of a different form of comics.
Okay.
So I will.
You just said they were the same.
They are the same in the same way that jazz is a different form of music.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
I see the difference.
Yep.
So what we really want to explore today a little bit is around. So we bring, like many classrooms will have graphic novels in the classroom, or we've got graphic novels in the library. Can you talk us through a little bit, though, that some of the features of graphic novels and how those features work? Because when we have children picking up graphic novels, often they'll be given to students who might be having a little bit of might be the striving readers, with the idea that, okay, there's not many words in here, so that's going to make it easier for them to read.
Yeah, I think graphic novels or comics they're a good gateway drug to reading.
Yes.
They're not as a page of comics is nowhere near as daunting to a young reader as a page of text.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that they're kind of given as a reward or incentive to the striving kids, whereas I'm not a teacher. I don't have that much direct classroom experience other than sort of sitting at a desk listening to the teacher. But I bring this up because my experience was, I was one of those kids that was an advanced reader, very keen to read. The last thing they were going to give me was comic books. They gave me the heavier books. They gave me even more text.
Yes.
Whereas I would have thought that comics would be given to a student who was struggling to read, and perhaps likely to be overwhelmed by just a block of text on the page.
Yes, and so I use the word striving as like the reader who is striving to be a better reader and to actually engage. You know, that often it's the strivers who are the ones who can't find the reading material that is going to engage them.
A student of one of my kids said that reading isn't taught, it's caught. You know, once you and there's that expression, the reading bug, and you see that in kids. That the lights go on and they have to read everything they can get their hands on.
Yes,
comics can be something that you can give to a student who hasn't found that magic book yet. Yes. That one that sort of tips them over and makes them go, aha, this is what this reading thing's all about. I get it and I love it.
Yes, yes. And then be motivated to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be motivated to engage with books. So, I think we've even done podcasts, like about the language features and structures of, say, informational text or, so different text types do have particular features to them, which graphic novels most definitely do, because they are, I think in our curriculum, they're sometimes referred to as hybrid text, where it's that play between illustration and written.
Yeah, I think that is the defining feature of comics. I'm sorry, I'm just going to call them comics because that's kind of the medium we're talking about. Yeah. A graphic novel is more of a format, and I know within the education system they wouldn't dare use the word comics, but. Sorry, I'm a cartoonist, so I'm going to use the word comics. Please forgive me. You can just insert graphic novels when you edit this later. But so a distinguishing feature of comics is that hybrid, that synergy between the text and the image. And it's up to the individual creator how they synthesize the two and how they use the two. And, it's not necessary that a more mature or complex graphic novel or comic is going to have more text. Quite often it's more the sophistication of how that text is used in the interplay with the images.
Right. So because you're working with text, especially in the Captain Congo, Ruth has been the writer, so you're working with the text. Now, as the comic creator, as the image creator...
Thank you for not calling me a graphic novelist.
As the image creator, that's what I'm calling you now, because your job now is to be doing all of these things. And I suppose what I'm trying to get at too is that if students were wanting to be creators of... So what are the tools for making a comic? Is that what you're trying to get to? You get given the words...
What's in the toolkit to make the page?
Yeah, the rest of it. What is it that you're...
and how do you connect with those words? What's...
Yeah, it's... Whether I'm doing... This is the commonality of all the work I do, and I work across a number of mediums. And whether I am engaging with a film script or a picture book or a script that's going to be a comic book / graphic novel, that the written word is always my prompt.
Yeah.
And, the first thing I have to do is figure out what is the story I'm telling here. And then you figure out how is that story being told. Now, the primary driver in any story is the protagonist. The who, what, when, where, why, who is number one. So invariably I start sketching the characters. Particularly in a comic, I'm going to be drawing, say as an example, a big gorilla and his penguin mate. I'm going to be drawing them over and over and over. So, and they are going to be featured on every page, if not every panel. And for those unfamiliar with the term, the panel is that box that makes up a page. Those boxes make up a page of comics.
Right.
So, you grab any page of, open any graphic novel, and you'll see there's going to be somewhere between 4 or 9 panels per page, and the protagonists are going to be on every one of those drawings. So it's a huge number of drawings, a huge range of expressions. That's the first thing I do. I try and figure out what these characters are going to look like and kind of the design of them. And that takes me into the story. And I start by thumbnailing out the whole thing, very, very rough drawings, and try and determine where the page count is, where those beats in the story are that kind of create a logical break visually, but as well as kind of in the flow of it. And you want to have kind of mini cliffhangers on the end of every page, ideally. Something that, gives the reader enough incentive to bring their eye over to the top corner of the next page, or actually go to the huge physical effort of turning that page into the next one. That's, if you're going to lose a reader, if they're bored by whatever material that they have in front of them, that's when they lose them. Rather than turn the page, they'll put the book aside and move on to something else. So ideally your story has enough of those points in it to, keep things engaging, and you can, create those little cliffhangers. So it's the pagination that is the biggest thing that I've got to figure out. That said, if you just plot along and decide, right, I'm going to have, 4 or 9 panels. I keep using, those are the two numbers I'm choosing, not necessarily at random, because they're both square roots. So you divide a page up, and with 2 lines across or 3 lines across each way, you get those number of panels. And that's, you kind of start with that grid as there's not only storytelling in comic making, but there's also a lot of design, tremendous amount of design. These pages have to look nice. Yeah. The individual panels have to be successful drawings, but then they have to make a larger composition of a successful page. And then if you have a double page spread, hopefully these 2 pages kind of look good facing each other. So hopefully you've got some sense of what are your odd and what are your even numbered pages, so that you know what pages are facing each other, are going to look good together. And also those odd numbered pages are very important. Those are your page turning pages. So make sure there's something good there to keep the reader going. So that's the hardest part. Yeah. And this is more than necessarily a young, potential comic maker, comic creator is probably going to want to grapple with. They just have to figure out how to make these individual drawings tell the story.
Yeah. So do you think it makes a difference? Like sometimes children will sit and they'll say, I'm going to create this as a comic, this story. I suppose some children have already got that story in their mind. Then there's others who just sit down and they draw the first picture and then they go, okay, and that'll lead me to the next box and to the next panel and the next panel.
Yep. Both procedures are valid.
Okay, that's what I'm. Yeah.
And like personally, I need to sort of have at least some sense of an ending. And I think it's the same with story writers as well. They have an opening scene in mind, and they will sit down at the keyboard and start writing, and eventually the characters they've created will take them there to that ending. Others, want to have some sort of sense of an outline, and I guess it's up to the individual writer how tight and detailed that outline needs to be before they really commence the process of writing proper. So the dangers, there's pros and cons to both. If you have the whole story mapped out and you thumbnail it all out, well, it does then, that's a lot of hard work to get to that stage, to plan your X number of pages and kind of have them all, even in very simple and crude drawings, to have them all kind of make sense. Easy to lose interest at that stage if you are, you're struggling with this new medium of comic making. But at the same time, the disadvantage of just plodding along with one drawing, it's also a lot of work just to finish one drawing and then go on to the next, and you've finished a couple of drawings. And once these drawings pile up behind you, they become a series of roadblocks. You can't go backwards anymore and change your mind if, a better idea comes along, and that can be discouraging too.
So other things that will draw the kids into what will make the graphic novel or comic really successful in terms of the way you draw the characters at the angle you draw them from, or, is it you're zooming right up on their face, or those sort of techniques? Is that something that really will change their interest?
It'll certainly change the story, and it's how you tell the story. And I think different artists will gravitate towards the things they like to draw or find easiest to draw. As an aside, I've been thinking a lot about Ruth lately, not only because this is, she passed away last year and this is the last story that of hers I'll get to illustrate, but Ruth and I had this thing where she would love nothing more than to dress our characters up into costumes, and I always pushed back against that. She'd set them, and she was endlessly amused by the idea that this big purple gorilla could, hide his identity merely by putting on a strange hat. and also these costumes be very elaborate, and usually sort of from the equally complex exotic locale she set them. And then I joke that I never got around to wiring her keyboard to give her a mild electric shock every time she wrote the word crowd. Because that's it, And then they entered the crowded train station. Ruth, that took you 10 seconds to write. That will take me all day to draw. And this being her last script, I didn't get the opportunity to have those sort of pushbacks. So I am drawing a lot of crowds and elaborate costumes. And
she got it all in there.
Yeah, she got her way in the end. I shouldn't be surprised. So without a writer to sort of create all these obstacles for me, there's another comic series I do called Monkey, Bug, Rabbit, and Goose, also in the school magazine, and it's pitched at sort of the younger side of the readership, and it's just 4 characters. It's really simple. A lot of I really try and keep sort of the jokes and the action moving along, and it is a simpler drawing style. But I found myself just racing through the pages, just finishing. I'm done by lunchtime. This is great. And I realized it's because I don't make anything difficult for myself. They're located, their adventures take place on the open sea or in a cave or, it's something that's very easy for me to draw. And I didn't even realize how lazy I was until I was, actually finished it. So you'll find that a young artist, like an old one, is going to make things easier for themselves. You of course want to challenge yourself a bit, and the challenges come from your own interests. Yeah. If you are interested enough about something, you will figure out a way to draw it, even if it is difficult and complex. Yeah. So, where and how those stories are told, is also kind of in the domain of the artist. So to take it back to Phil's earlier question, whether a story is told, just say with close-up drawings of the characters' faces versus a bunch of wide shots where you see a lot of the detail of the backgrounds and the environment they're in, are going to be kind of decisions that an artist will make based on what they think is maybe required for the story, or quite often what they feel like drawing. If you don't have the sort of imposition of an editor or another writer, if it's all completely sort of self-generated, you might find yourself going down an easier path. Yes. And that's fine if it gets the story told. Yeah.
I guess they're the kinds of things, though, that as readers, we can notice the things that the illustrator is doing, that going and the effect of that, whoa, that's a close-up. So, is that used to maybe create some of the cliffhanger moment?
Well, it's a close-up. Like, I will use it, just a panel that largely consists of a character's face. If there's something very important the character says and is saying at that moment, and I don't want sort of any extraneous detail, I want to focus, pay attention to what this gorilla is saying right now. Or if there's a particular expression, and sometimes it will be, just because a character, like, again, to the example of Captain Congo, Pug is the one who's the comic foil. So I can think of a few examples where I have given Pug his own panel just because he's had a real over-the-top reaction to something. Yeah. Whereas, 220 plus pages in with Captain Congo after all this time, I'm struggling to sort of, give him new expressions that are just variations of the same stoicism. And, he's not the most expressive character, whereas Pug is the opposite, and I think that's why the series has had that longevity. You've got that dynamic between the two characters. And so much of that dynamic is in the visuals. Yes, there is a difference in the text and the dialogue that Ruth has created for them. And then I make sure that's amplified in the drawings as well. The captain is the serious, the grim one, the stoic character. Pug is the very reactive, the comic relief. He's the one that's exaggerated and over the top.
So the illustrator is really the one doing most of the inferencing.
Yes, but prompted by the writer.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's, you ask an illustrator that question, what kind of answer do you think you're going to get? We're doing all the heavy lifting, the writers have just been, riding our coattails since year one. And that is entirely untrue.
Yeah.
And the very first story we did for the school magazine was based on a script that I'd started. For whatever reason, and I can't remember why now, Ruth was either too busy or not particularly interested in submitting to the school magazine. I don't think she was particularly aware of it and maybe didn't recognize it as sort of an opportunity for us.
Yeah.
But the deadline was approaching, and I thought, well, I'm just going to have a crack at this myself. How hard can it be? And wrote a story where, again, being lazy, Pug just stays home. I mean, I took the... Captain Congo leaves, and it was called The Perils of Pug. And what happens is Captain Congo pretends to leave, and Pug is left at home with Madame Jambon, their housekeeper, to sort of protect her and take care of the place. And all kinds of things happen, and Pug has to test himself to make sure things are kept under control. And of course, it was all a big setup so to make sure that he'd get his next special agent status and so on. Ruth had to step in and sort of, bash it into shape for me at the end of it. But it's certainly, of all the Captain Congo stories, it's the lesser of them. I'm sure there's some readers and fans of the 1010 books. What was it? The Castafiore Diamond? Is that one where they just stay home?
Yes, yes.
The diamond goes missing in the house. Yeah. And it's good, but it's not the greatest 1010 adventure. And yeah, Perils of Pug is okay, but it's not the best Captain Congo adventure because, the drawing guy was writing it. What do you expect?
So really you're, one of the noticings, of course, that, readers of a comic or that hybrid kind of text, but we'll use the word comic. I know if you're being given the text for it, but if I'm as a writer creating, certainly in primary school, students are being the writer and the illustrator.
Yeah, and
in most instances.
And that happens in the professional world as well.
Yes, yeah. But there's three kinds of, text can be on the page as spoken text, so it can be in a speech bubble, it can be in a thought bubble, or it could just be...
As sort of that narration bubble or not bubble, that narration box. Yeah. And I think Ruth had, I think she's written more comic books than she ever read. And, but she's a very accomplished writer and sort of, figured that out pretty quickly. And one of the first things that she recognized was it's like a movie script. Dialogue is imperative, and, the action... if it can't be described, or it should be, rather than describe it, it should be done by the pictures. And that was also part of the education process with Ruth. It was she learned to pare back her writing. I'd say, well, you don't really need to say, they return home for a cup of tea. I'll say, I will draw the cups of tea, and maybe we would say later is all we need. Later, ...
Yes.
And even maybe we don't even need that because I'll just draw it as nighttime. And then we know that the reader has known that time has passed.
Yes.
Those sort of, she quickly realized that the pictures could do a lot more of the work.
Yeah.
And where the pictures, couldn't with the dialogue. So that was my job to, make sure that those pictures were going to, how a character was saying that dialogue was my job, and her job was to create the dialogue. So things like, he exclaimed loudly. Well, you don't need to write that, obviously. It's being drawn, hopefully, by the illustrator as a character, sort of shouting, and with a look of exclamation on their face.
Yes, yeah.
So it's really interesting, the interplay between the pictures and the words and, what we're trying to get the kids to comprehend what they're reading. So the interplay between the two is helping their comprehension of what's going on in this story, isn't it? And pictures can sometimes do that better.
I think sometimes pictures can do it a little bit more efficiently. What pictures aren't very good at is telling an internal story, which is where thought balloons come in, where, so you have what you show what a character's thinking. And, I can draw those characters to have an expression on their face, which perhaps gives some clue to how their thoughts are making them feel. But the specific details of those thoughts, I can't draw those. That has to be written.
Okay. All right. That answers a really big question for me, because that's that, when do you know when to have what, that it's, that's exactly it, isn't it? If it can't be drawn, then
call in the writer.
Call in. Yeah.
And I think what can't be drawn sometimes is based on, it can be a limitation of the illustrator as well. But also it's a matter of personal preference, or the preference of that team or that individual that's making the comic. How much balance, how much weight do I give the words versus the drawings? And that can vary within the story. Or even within the page count. If you have a lot of story and only a few pages, well, then you're probably going to have a lot more words. You're going to have a few slabs, a few paragraphs to sort of write out what's, some action that you don't have room to draw. If for whatever reason there's a limitation of the number of pages that you can fill.
Yeah, yeah.
When you're reading a play, it can speed up the whole thing if you have some narration in there, because they can tell the story a lot quicker than the dialogue can run it through. So similar thing here, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
It's the narrator, some narration might be, they return home via the coast of Africa. And then the next panel, next drawing, they're already home. Whereas otherwise it would take 2 or 3 drawings to show them sort of returning home by whatever means of transport you have over Africa.
Yeah. So let's say I'm, 8, 9, 10, and I'm creating a comic. What am I putting on the page first? The illustration or the text?
Use pencil. That's good. Would be my advice to my 9-year-old self. And use pencil, and don't make perfect drawings the first time. You want your drawings placed to tell a story, and allow some space for the speech balloons. And also, and here's a common trap for young players. Write out the words and then draw the balloon around them, not the other way around.
Right. I love that as a practical. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like. Everyone who's ever made a comic has done this. I'll draw the balloon and then I'll cram in the words, and oh no, I've run out of space. Yeah. And also it kind of looks ugly. You want a certain amount of air around the text. Yeah. Otherwise it just kind of looks a little bit sort of cluttered. And because the drawings can be quite busy, and then nothing's busier than all that text crammed together. Having some white space for the words to float into in the speech balloon, aesthetically and I think practically has a value. Yeah. So kids, write the words first.
Yes.
So should they write the story out as a story first before they even start or can they go straight into the?
It's hard to. You don't want to sort of hold anyone back by giving them a real set procedure and then have them lose enthusiasm. It might depend on the individual student. Some kids are going to be more comfortable writing the story and then choose just to have very simple rudimentary drawings because that's less of an interest or an ability for them. Yes. And then there's other, 9-year-old versions of Greg Holfeld who just want to just draw and will draw, and then draw some speech balloons and try and cram some words in almost as an afterthought. And I know the very first comics I made were seldom finished because I would not plan a story. I'd have a setup and I'd just draw like crazy, and then now what do we do? I don't know. I just move on.
Yeah, we'll just get everyone to stay at home.
Yeah, exactly. Writing has never sort of come that easily for me. And, I've managed to write a few things. I think the Monkey Bug, Rabbit, and Goose stories are fun and they're simple. But, I reach out to writer friends all the time saying, I've got myself in a corner here. I've got my characters up a tree. How do I get them down?
So this medium really enhanced your learning and your enthusiasm for reading and writing as well, I suppose, didn't it, in a way?
Yeah, I was never one of those reluctant readers. I was always really keen to read, but also really keen in visual storytelling too, obviously. Love cartoons and comics and movies from a very young age. So I can't remember one necessarily prompting the other. I guess, back, in the dark ages when I was, being taught, there was certainly no comics or graphic novels in my school library. I figured out that they hid a few of them in the nonfiction section in 741, my favorite Dewey Decibel number. Yeah. That's where all the comic books were hiding, like the collection of Peanuts and, and those sort of things, as well as, some of the how to draw books. But no, the comics I had to buy from the corner store, off the spinner rack.
Mm.
Do teachers worry about if a child solely goes on to graphic novels and doesn't get onto other books that are without those features?
But do they worry about it? I don't know if people worry about it, but I think it's part of the expanding of children's experience with all kinds of texts, that being able to, if I'm reading graphic novels, do I need to move off those? Well, we would want children to be experiencing different types of texts over
Ideally,
time.
I think, I'm not a teacher, but as a parent, my kids read my comic books,
yes.
So, and they didn't get stuck. And I can't imagine if they did, or if it would be a problem. I think if my children were very reluctant readers or struggled with reading, and they somehow engaged with comics and got stuck there, well, at least they'd be reading that.
Yes.
And there's such a wealth of material out there in graphic novels now. True. I think there was probably a greater case for sort of ghettoizing comics when I was 10 years old, because they were largely superheroes and funny animals, and whereas that's not necessarily bad, they're fairly limited genres and approaches. And now there is not a reading level or subject matter that would not be covered by at least one graphic novel.
Yes, yeah. I'm just thinking about students creating graphic novels too, because I think when we read, I think children notice things, young readers notice more about text if they're also engaged in the writing process.
Well, we all, if we take ownership of anything, we're a lot more invested in it.
Yes, yeah. And it's just made me think in discussion about, especially when you mentioned Peanuts, about how much white space there was.
Yeah.
In a Peanuts
those
book.
are perfect examples of just the clarity of those images.
Yeah.
And Charles Schulz taught himself, he never considered himself a great illustrator, great artist, but he was an incredibly competent one. You never look at anything drawn in a Peanut strip and go, what the heck is that? Is that a pot plant or a gun? I have no idea. Everything is just so clear and so simply drawn. Yeah. And it takes a fair degree of training and discipline to be able to achieve that. And I sort of fell into the same trap when I was, a young scribbler, thinking that more detail was going to save the day. If I just put a few more sort of like bolts or scales or feathers or whatever on this and just keep drawing the blazes out of it, it'll just come together. And no, it gets murkier and horrible. Yeah. It's, that simplicity of form and the clarity.
Yes.
But I think I've probably made the point that making a graphic novel is a really complex and time-consuming undertaking. So if we want to sort of break that down into a bite-sized and achievable piece for a student, when I've given talks at schools, I often or do a workshop, I sort of take them through just the simplest form of it, and that is the basic building block of a story is any story, regardless of how long it is setup, action, reaction / punchline or payoff. And think of any joke that you care to tell. And it is that, okay, here's the example I use. And warning, this is not a good joke. It's a dad joke, but it does the job. So a duck walks into the chemist. There's our setup. We've got our protagonist, the duck, and the chemist are setting, and he says to the chemist, some lip balm, please. So there's our action. So and the chemist says, certainly, sir, will that be cash or charge? So, we're expanding our action here. So we set things up. Here's our action. And then the payoff is, the duck says, just put it on my bill.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Oldie but a goodie. So, there you have, and it could be any joke. So think of your favorite joke, dirty or not. It still works for dirty ones, folks. That, it's set up, action, payoff. Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be funny. It can be, a character, walks into a room and says, and points to someone and said, you're the one who stole my bicycle, and walks over and punches him. There's a setup, and there's that bit of violence at the end is kind of the payoff for that, that sense of what's going to happen next. Yeah. So I've taken students through that example with the duck. Don't use the violent one. I just use the duck. Yeah. But you can tell that story in a number of ways. And this, to go back to Phil's earlier point about whether you use close-ups or how you draw it. So I've drawn that very simple comic strip almost as kind of a brooding, dark sort of noir. You start off with a long shot of, the silhouette and just the chemist sign and the duck walking in, and he's looking all shifty, and the chemist is kind of nervous as he replies. Wow. Yeah. And then the duck just, the last panel is, the duck says, just put it on my bill, and just, he's just a streak as he exits. And you're kind of left wondering, well, what's going on? So that payoff also then creates intrigue and sort of what's happened next. And just, it kind of takes the humor out of it as well, because you just through the, haven't changed a word of the dialogue, but just through how you've done the pictures, you've changed the tone of that completely.
And in that way, when you talked earlier about the, that there would either be, say, 3 panels or 4 panels,
4 or 9, or any number you like.
It can be any number.
Yep.
But actually,
it can be even one. That's called a splash page in the comic world.
Ooh. Nice. Nice to know. So actually, I love that idea of having a joke or having a very simple story like that.
Yeah, even the setup of your story, your inciting incident is going to have enough of a payoff to want to compel the next setup.
Yes.
And a longer story is just a series of these sort of interconnected setups until you get the big payoff at the end.
Yes, yeah. So even if we talked, like that's almost like a 4-panel story, isn't it?
3-4 panels, yeah.
3 or 4 panels, but that could still be over, I could have a splash page, a 2-panel page, and another splash page, couldn't I?
For 30 pages if you wanted. The duck could, just sort of wander the aisles, pat himself down. I left my wallet at home, whatever.
Yes, yeah. But I suppose it's that, and for younger children too, if I'm talking primary students, the idea of I don't have to have 15 panels on a page, and how am I going to fit it all? That idea of trying to squeeze everything into that little space. Sometimes that idea of just opening it out of that peanuts. Let's have some white space here. Let's have some simplicity to it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a complex and, so much detail in it that I can't get past the first panel because I'm trying to get everything in there.
And if you have a room full of students, they're all going to have different drawing and reading levels.
Yes.
And if you've, say, given them this script, or some are going to be able to write their own scripts, others are going to struggle and they might be perfectly happy drawing the duck joke. Others are going to go to town on the drawings, and others are going to struggle. Yeah. And, and I've said this to students, I don't care how complex or detailed your drawings are. They can, as long as they're clear. And if you're really, really struggling, just make the duck as 2 circles, the chemist is a rectangle, with it just, with a circle on top. They're different enough, that we can tell which character is which. But they're not going to be great drawings, but they'll still tell your story.
I like that. And I think that brings the other point to light, that it doesn't have to be an original story that we're creating.
No.
We can retell a story.
Yeah.
We can, if we know, not that we have to be doing a retell, but that's an option. Yeah. Create something or retell something.
Well, I'm sure that every library has graphic novels on their shelves, which are retelling of other novels, classic novels or variations. I think you mentioned before we started recording that there was some series that had previously been chapter books, which are now done as graphic novels.
Yes, like Wings of Fire, came out as novels, and I don't know how many in the series have now been created as the graphic novel. Same with the Babysitters Club.
Yeah.
Babysitters Club's all back all over again.
Yeah, confession, I've never read a single Babysitters Club. Are they the same stories, just retold as comics, or are they sort of new stories with the same characters? Or
I can't answer that one truthfully, because I haven't read all of the Babysitters Clubs.
Nothing to be ashamed of.
But I know there's a whole resurgence of
Yeah.
Babysitter Club by the fact that they're now out as graphic novels.
Well, from the publishing point of view, that's great. I'm sure the original creators of Babysitter's Club are also very happy about that.
yes, yeah.
But also the idea that the classic comics has never gone away either. You know, to go back to our generation, those were the, quote, good comics that occasionally your stern aunt would buy for you, you know, because
Yes.
they were adaptations of you know, classic literature.
Yeah.
And that hasn't gone away. There's still variations of that being done.
The other aspect of graphic novels is, you know, I taught in a school with a lot of children that newly arrived from other countries, and having a high amount of visuals in their writing or their reading was really advantageous for them. They could actually tell the story in their own language as
Yes.
well. Yep.
Yeah.
And also, if students are struggling with some of the words in the text, you know, that picture will give some clues to their meaning or their context as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's actually the other type of text that's on the page will be so we talked about, you know, be thoughts or speech or like the narrative,
yeah.
the narration of it. But then text will often have, you know, like the sound effects or, you know, in writing.
Yeah, and that's often put in as kind of that's incorporated into the visuals. You know, it's not just sitting there, you know, in the same font as or writing as the dialogue. It's because it's not a character speaking it, you know, and no narrator ever has said, and things go boom. You know, you just draw boom, and it becomes part of your drawing of the explosion.
Yes, because those things aren't the writer's not going to put those in.
No, I take great pleasure in making up my own sound effects.
Yes,
you know, like what exactly is that going to sound like?
Yes, yes. And then choosing, and that's it. And that's sort of like onomatopoeia coming in, you know, here's the...
Yeah, that's exactly onomatopoeia.
Yeah. How am I going to, what is the sound?
Yeah.
How am I going to write that, and in what shape am I going to put that in? Because that's often within, either in the style of lettering, that may... so font style, or within a shape. You know, if it's the
you would have
be in the little.
You would design kaboom differently than you would splash.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So that's a good indicator for readers, and even if this isn't in your first language, you know, all of those things are markers, aren't they, of saying, this isn't a narrative piece. This is this must be to do something with the, you know, with the sound or the, you know, just like speech bubbles. So all of those markers are actually important indicators for us of yes, is this being thought? Is it being spoken? Is it being told? Is it being heard?
Yeah, and that can be very important and very specific in some forms of comics. I know in Japanese manga, there's less sort of made up sound effects. They will be very specific. If there's a couple of characters that, you know, written there, the reader then knows that off screen a shoji door is opening, because that's that little. For the life of me, I cannot remember what the two syllables are, but that you know, that indicates, you know, off screen a door that, you know, that particular sliding door is opening.
Yes, yeah. So they are specific features to the.
That's separate. Yeah, like manga, the Japanese comics is almost regarded as kind of a separate, you know, a separate format, and because they developed their own very, very strong comic book culture, you know, decades before the West did, or at least it was mainstreamed sooner than the West was, and that's you know, as a young cartoonist, that's what I found so intriguing about Japan, and compelled me to visit there in my early 20s, was that this is a place, this is the mecca of the modern comic book, and you did not have to have that argument about comic books being suitable for a broad readership.
Just wrapping up now, I'm just going to ask both of you, in terms of what we've talked about today, what would you say, if a teacher's using graphic novels in their classroom, what would be, from your perspective, Sharon, what would be one of the key things that you would give them as a tip, I suppose, for using graphic novels as a reader or a writer to support their children?
All right, I think, one, having access to, you know, bringing graphic novels or comics or, you know, into classrooms, because not all students will necessarily have access to them. And I think that noticing how they work and not just leaving it there as, well, that can do its job. I think sometimes we need some entry points into
just showing the kids how they actually work.
Yeah. And to, some of these things are new for me to think about, that Greg's talked about, that idea of space. That's something that I have not really thought about before, the importance of the space. I don't know that I'd really thought, yes, I know that there's, that some things are said and then there's the narration, but I'd never really thought before about, the things that are in the thought bubbles are the things that can't be shown any other way.
Yeah. Well, because even if a character is speaking out loud, quite possibly that's also in conjunction with some of their actions.
Yes.
But
yes.
We keep our thoughts internal as characters as well.
Yes.
So, Greg, would you have a tip for teachers in using graphic novels in their classrooms with their kids?
I think, be aware that graphic novels there's as wide a range of them as other books. And not every reader is going to be attracted to the same books, and nor is every graphic novel of the same quality as well. There's some duds out there, and some are just not going to be as attractive to a young reader because their pages are too busy. Maybe they're poorly designed. But others, there'll also be equally some very pleasant surprises. There's a wealth of material out there in all kinds of different formats. And in terms of getting students to make their own, same, the KISS principle applies as it does for, so many things. Keep it simple. Keep it simple, students.
I think when they first came out, I noticed that people thought, it's going to be easier to read because it's all pictures, but then some of the text was really quite hard to read. So that's another thing, isn't it?
That could be there's a number of reasons that. It could be just from a writer just being a little bit unrestrained, or it could be some poor design on the part of the letter or the illustrator not sort of leaving sufficient space for the balloons or the text, and not giving due attention to the placement of the text on the page to make sure that it's sort of placed in a logical manner, that, sort of linear manner, so that the reader knows to go left to right, up and down, and that the text is going to be read in the correct order.
Yeah. And also the readability, some of the vocabulary was really quite difficult. And I think the teacher was expecting that because it was a graphic novel, that it would be quite easy reading. Again, I think perhaps a younger teacher who's probably grown up with this sort of new culture of graphic novels. This is not going to be news to them. Yeah, someone closer to our age is where we grew up with comics as kind of just solely children's literature, is going to make that assumption. And that's certainly not the case. There's comics that are going to be inappropriate for young readers, not only just because of their complexity, but also, of course, because of their subject matter as well. So, have a look at what's out there. I don't want to be scaring anyone off, thinking that these graphic novels are the potential landmine of inappropriate material. No, that's. I think a good publisher will make you aware of and a good publisher would be one like Top Shelf. Okay. They do a lot of really good books for a younger reader. They have a range, but they will certainly target books for very young readers. Yep.
First Second is another good publisher. They tend to do books maybe slightly older readership. Getting into your upper primary and teens. And for beautifully produced books, No Brow is another publisher you'd want to look at.
Okay. Are they overseas or Australian?
They're all overseas. There's not a lot of Australian publishers. Gestalt is a publisher based, I think they're still based in WA. But like the Australian comics industry it's kind of a cottage industry, to be honest. Yeah. And there's certainly a good number of comic book creators and graphic novelists in Australia, but most of them tend to get their work published from overseas. There's a HarperCollins they picked up our books, but they also have published some graphic novels as well. There's some good Australian material out there.
I wonder if there's much Indigenous material.
A little bit. The aforementioned Gestalt does some some work in that area, as well as Brendan McKenna. He's done a series called Ubby's Underdogs, which is based on a bunch of kids in Broome. And he's got a new series out. I can't remember the name of the series, but he's a Indigenous comics creator that does some really nice work.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, Greg, for today. It was just fantastic having you here. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We've loved to see that so many of you have subscribed to our episodes from all corners of the world. The Teacher's Toolkit podcast is all about giving you an insider's guide to top teaching ideas, tools, techniques in literacy, teaching and learning. Please subscribe to our weekly newsletter via the website. You will receive advance notice on blogs, podcasts, events and ways to contact us. Thank you and all the best to you, our listeners. And thanks again, Greg.
My pleasure, Phil. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.